There was nothing but sand. Nothing at all. The same color ran to the edge of sight. So this was a desert, I thought. It was my first time in a place like this. I had seen deserts many times on screens, but that was different. You had to stand in one yourself. Still, saying there was nothing might not be accurate. From the airport window, I could see a few buildings along the road. They looked like shops. Cloth stretched over metal frames. Simple structures with dirt floors that met the ground outside. Sand probably blew straight through them. The road itself was wide and paved. Only there did the place feel modern. The upper level of the airport was modern too. That was where arrivals and departures were handled. But downstairs, near the exit, the building felt older. Paint peeled from the walls. The lights were dim. Wooden benches sat in an empty hall. Signs were painted directly onto the walls. There were no robots. Not many people either. There were only 2 exits. North exit and south exit. No further explanation. There was almost nothing outside anyway. Maybe there was nothing to explain. Near the doors, there was no information about transportation. I called for a mobility unit from the terminal. Arrival time, 40 minutes. I sat on a bench and opened the guide. The planet had no public transportation. People own their own vehicles. That was normal here. The first floor of the airport had originally been built as a train station. Years ago, there had been plans for a railway. Even the road outside had been laid down with tracks in mind. But the project was abandoned. Interplanetary travel became easier, and most residents moved to nearby worlds with better infrastructure. Even now, some people still lived on Yahma. Many belonged to tribes that kept the old desert way of life. In recent years, wealthy settlers have begun arriving too. People rich enough to build their own infrastructure from scratch. One reason was tax policy. Another was the lack of restrictions on alcohol and drugs, both banned on many other planets. The client I had come to visit seemed to belong to that group. His name was Mike Lee. The company records listed him as an advisor to an investment firm. But according to my supervisor, he might have used other names and professions as well. When the maintenance job was assigned to me, I tried to book a hotel. There were none on Yahma. The only accommodations were expensive vacation properties rented by the building. Later, I learned I was expected to stay at the client's residence. They had offered airport pickup, but my flight changed several times because of other work. I declined. Now I regretted it. The mobility unit finally arrived. Once I entered the address, it began moving through the desert. Concrete buildings appeared now and then, but they all looked privately owned. I saw no public facilities, no stores, no restaurants, no people walking, only the occasional transport vehicle passing in the opposite direction. After about an hour, the buildings disappeared entirely. Far away, a large animal moved across the sand. A camel, maybe. I took out my goggles to zoom in, but before the resolution adjusted, the animal vanished behind the dunes. A huge sun sank slowly toward the horizon, turning the desert red. By the time darkness settled over the land, the road had begun to climb. Shrubs and thin grass appeared here and there along the roadside. Ahead stood a large gate lit by floodlights. Beyond it, lights from a building glowed faintly. The map identified it as a private residence. A little farther on, another property appeared. Then another. The buildings were spaced far apart from one another and set deep back from the road. The estates must have been enormous. The mobility unit stopped in front of the 5th gate. The door locks released. I had arrived. I waited. The gate opened without a sound, and a small figure stepped out. It approached the vehicle slowly. Only when it came close did I realize it was a robot. When I opened the door, the robot took my luggage and gestured for me to follow. The mobility unit was not allowed inside. The building lights still seemed very far away. I wondered if we would walk. Behind me, the gate closed soundlessly. The mobility unit turned around and drove back into the dark. Then a small roofless car emerged from the shadows. The robot loaded my luggage onto it and motioned for me to climb in. Once seated, I felt the cart begin moving toward the building. I looked back once. The robot stood beside the gate, bowing politely. As we drew closer, the scale of the structure became clear. It did not look like a private home. It looked more like a museum. The entrance sat high above the ground at the end of a long ramp. Beside it stretched an open corridor supported by columns, running deeper into the complex. The cart did not head toward the main entrance. Instead, it followed the corridor toward another building farther inside. The cart stopped beneath warm lights. A man stood waiting at the entrance. He wore a white turban. He introduced himself as Rasa, one of the house staff. When I gave my name, he nodded and led me inside. The ceilings were high. Mosaic tiles and carved stone covered the walls and floors. Ceramic vases stood in alcoves like museum pieces. Whether they were truly valuable or not, I could not tell. Rasa stopped before a door marked with the number 4 and unlocked it with a card key. The room inside was large, with separate dining and living areas. Unlike the exterior, the interior was modern. Black and white furniture. Clean lines. No bed in sight, so the bedroom was probably separate. Beyond the living room was a wide terrace facing the garden, though outside there was only darkness. The suite was large enough for 3 or 4 guests. Better than any hotel room I had stayed in. Rasa pointed to the room terminal. Meals and supplies could be requested at any hour. Information about the estate was also stored there. Then he moved on to the job itself. I had come to perform maintenance on the client's privately owned virtual room, but the equipment was located inside a restricted area. Access hours were limited. The estate was divided into public and private sections. Tonight, I would have roughly 2 hours to work. Tomorrow, only a short window in the afternoon. The schedule could change again, he said, so I should keep checking the updates. I began to wonder if the work would even be completed. Rasa handed me a list of inspection items. There were many. I would not be meeting the client directly. All questions and reports were to go through him. Because time was limited, we headed immediately toward the virtual room. Rasa walked ahead. I asked what I should do tomorrow morning if I could not work. "Please enjoy your stay," he said. Entertainment and relaxation services were available through the terminal. I was also free to leave the property. Mobility rentals and sightseeing reservations could be arranged from the room. I worried about the cost. I imagined the company receiving some impossible bill later. When I asked carefully about it, Rasa explained that guests staying on the property incurred no expenses at all, whether inside or outside the estate. Transportation, meals, entertainment, everything was included. It was more generous than I expected. I almost forgot I was there for work. I asked if there were many other guests. Rasa said that, including permanent staff, temporary workers, family members, friends, business associates, and visitors, nearly 100 people were staying on the grounds. At the end, he reminded me once more how much time I had left to work. After that, he said, I was not to approach the private area under any circumstances. If you need anything, call from the terminal. Then he left the virtual room. The door closed softly behind him. Only the low sound of the air system remained.